Well, we finally made it this far, covering multiple eras of classic Toho films to the current era of which we rest in. Legendary's Monsterverse launched in 2014, a decade after the last official Toho Godzilla film. But let me tell you something, 2004 to 2014 felt like the longest era in my life. While the Godzilla series was dormant, the character was well in the spotlight. By this point, it was just a massive pop culture icon. When Toho put out Godzilla Final Wars, it really wasn't clear how long Godzilla would be gone. But this didn't stop such films like Godzilla 3D to the Max from going into development. An unmade project which was envisioned by Yoshimitsu Banno, director of the classic Godzilla vs. Hedorah. For those that don't know, this is a project that went through developmental hell as early as 2003 and really never made it off the ground. The idea of it was to be a short 36-minute Godzilla film. Ultimately, it would never survive developmental hell and become abandoned by 2009. By March of 2010, Legendary would acquire the rights to Godzilla, and simply just Godzilla himself, and announce intentions to move forward with their own Godzilla series. I firmly recall this being extremely interesting, because really when you think about it at this time, it was make it or break it. There was no way we could afford to have another bad American Godzilla film. And for the record, saying Godzilla 98 is bad is kind of subjective depending on who you talk to, but realistically it didn't get the reception that was hoped. Quote from Thomas Tull on this film, "Our plans are to produce the Godzilla that we, as fans, would want to see. We intend to do justice to those essential elements that have allowed this character to remain as pop culturally relevant for as long as it has." Comic-Con 2013, we finally got our first good look at the brand new American Godzilla film.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The reaction to this teaser? Praised by fans and critics alike. Just based off the tone, the approach, and so much speculation just went into this 1 minute and 33 teaser. And while a lot of this didn't end up in the actual film, such as this kaiju we see here, this here was far more dark and grim, almost giving audiences the impression that Godzilla would be the sole main antagonist again, kicking off this era. It was simple. This movie hyped fans up to see the return of Godzilla on the big screen. Okay, so a little confession I need to talk about. This film, among the time that it was coming out, I didn't want to know a lot of details of what was in the film exactly. In fact, I put myself in the dark with this film. And trust me, during this time, it was hard to evade any details in Facebook groups posting things about the toys or analyzation of the trailer. Yeah, it was next to impossible. This wasn't the 90s anymore, a new era where everything is at our fingertips. The promotional material for this film was day and night versus Godzilla 98. There was no hiding the new Godzilla design. Show the people the new Godzilla. And for the record, I do want to go and add this film didn't oversaturate the promotional material like say Godzilla 98 did. So we're not talking music videos with top music acts, none of that attached and such. Where this movie did excel though was in the virtual world. Mobile games like Godzilla Strike, which probably provided like a good 13 minutes at most just saving random civilians and navigating through the ruins of San Francisco. But really though, that wasn't the highlight mobile game, it was just one of the games. The highlight for me was Godzilla Smash 3. Don't ask me where the 3 really came from, I really don't get it myself. But this game was Candy Crush Godzilla, where you tactically fought enemies and overcame every obstacle along the way. To this day, I still want a brand new version of this game, but geared towards the Toho films is all. For me though personally, one of the most exciting things is this film would release on the last day I was 22. Godzilla to release with the cast of Ken Watanabe, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, and Bryan Cranston. One detail I was unable to evade about this film was it was clear after a certain point that Godzilla would not be alone in this film. So yes, there would be another monster joining Godzilla in this reboot. So taking a different approach than say like reboots like Godzilla 1984 or Godzilla 98, which favored Godzilla simply, fighting the military. So who would this mystery kaiju be? I remember a lot of speculation that it was going to be Rodan somehow, but it was apparent this was going to be somebody we've never seen before. Well, let's talk about the film and get into it. This movie remains very true to the original Godzilla. Godzilla, an ancient super beast, has been lured in an attempt to be killed by nuclear weapons, all covered up as tests to the public. I want to go ahead and add also for the Monsterverse, one of my favorite moments and also a pure turn the volume up moment is the intros. These intros just basically detailing and briefing the audience about what you are about to witness. Top secret, confidential information. Nearly every Monsterverse film has used this, with the exception of one film. And I do hope that this becomes a normal standard basically for every Monsterverse film going forward because of the fact that it just feels like something that's iconic for the Monsterverse itself, and there's so much lore as well for these films. We fast forward to 99 and this is where we're introduced to Dr. Serizawa and Vivian Graham. where they proceed to investigate the remains of giant spores, which will become a major problem in this film going forward. So at this point, it's pretty well confirmed to the audience that yes, there is other kaiju than Godzilla himself, but the trouble is going to be doubled up. One that hatched, one that is dormant at the moment. Well, the one that hatched, all eyes on him as he makes his way to Japan. From here, we're introduced to the eventual main character, young Ford Brody living in Japan with his parents, Joe and Sandra, where we already have suspicious activity going on. And this is where every time I watch this film, I think, man, I wish Joe's character had a larger role in the Monsterverse in the grand scheme. Because damn, Bryan Cranston is such a talented actor and this character is so motivated by loss. And he isn't willing to let go of what happened on that day at the Jinjera nuclear power plant. Bryan Cranston is one of the key draws in this film, and the delivery he has here, early on, just makes this film dark and gloomy, knowing his wife never made it back before he could close the reactor door. It's bad enough knowing he lost her, but seeing her face one last time knowing he can't do anything as she dies on the other side of the door is heartbreaking. From here we move to a present day 2014 and we meet an adult Ford Brody, who will become the central character going forward. So I'm not gonna lie about something, but I've always found Ford's character and his wife Ellie to be just flat and uninteresting in this film. Like, I feel like it's really hard to follow them along. And when I go back and watch this film, and even think about when I first saw this film, I never seen them being the core part of the Godzilla series if it had been just a standalone Godzilla series. I get most viewers just really want to see monsters fighting and destruction in cities, but really I do pay attention to the human characters in this film when I do grade these films. What's their motives? What drives them? Their desires? But Ford, all we know is he lost his mother as a child. He spends the beginning of this film in denial, running from the truth. He believes his father is a nut job and really just wants little to do with his dad's driving force, to expose the truth. And it isn't until his father is arrested and Ford bails his father out, and his father ends up convincing him to stop running. So let's backtrack and look at his wife a bit now. I do think Elizabeth Olsen is an extremely talented actress, but here, let's be honest. She spends most of the film just being the extremely stressed out wife, wondering where her husband is most of the film. That's it. So let's move forward and talk about the positive. Exploring the ruins of Jinjera, the quarantine zone, is really a scene that intrigued me as a viewer, because I want to know what they're dealing with, and who is this new kaiju, and it just builds up so well with a dark tone. And the instant classic dialogue after Joe and Ford are captured.
What's really happening is that you're hiding something out there. This is what caused everything in the first place. Don't you see that? And it is going to send us back to the Stone Age.
Everything from here in this film just pops off in full force, despite the fact there are two things that kind of bother me though. So we end up losing Joe now that Ford has lost both of his parents early on. The next issue isn't so much an actual issue with the movie, however the Blu-ray home media transfer was botched badly. I've tried cleaning it up, certain scenes the best that I can, but seriously, if you own a copy of this movie on Blu-ray, turn off any lights that may interfere with the screen or adjust your monitor's settings. Yeah, it's not AVPR bad, but it's still problematic. I don't remember it being this bad in theaters when I watched it. Anybody that owns a 4K copy, please tell me if the problem is resolved also. So back to the loss of Joe. It doesn't feel like his loss fuels Ford very much in this film, which kinda sucks because there should have been a big payoff in this film, but it doesn't feel like it ever kicks in at any point. Sure, he is helping track down the Muto that killed his father, but really it doesn't seem like there's a lot of emotion. And sometimes I really think that possibly the male Muto should have been the main antagonist in this film over the female due to the fact that it indirectly killed his father. So they could have built off that for Ford's character. So we spend a lot of time developing the Muto, building him as a threat throughout the film, and what I do love about this film is the emphasis on nature's natural order, Godzilla's relation to the Mutos. And yeah, sure, the Muto is much weaker than the classic kaiju that Godzilla fought in the Toho era. The problem with the Muto is this creature can be overwhelming in numbers, especially as shown once we get introduced to the female. And the fact that if these two creatures successfully kill Godzilla and successfully hatch the Muto eggs, this could become an issue for mankind as the Mutos will spread. Furthermore, these creatures can emit EMP pulses, which aren't an issue for Godzilla, but they render human technology just useless, which may cause us to rely on less efficient ways to fight. Godzilla is part of the natural order. You want to talk about perfectly shot scenes? Well, look no further than Godzilla's arrival. I just remember the first time I saw this, being in pure awe, waiting for his appearance, and getting that first roar of dominance. Unfortunately, one complaint about this film is it does tend to cut away Lots of times when we do see Godzilla for the first time, or when it looks like we're getting ready to see a battle sequence, I didn't have a problem with it myself, but I see how some fans may have been really annoyed by this when you want to see kaiju just go at it.
Let them fight.
Fear not though, we do end up getting a payoff in this film as we get a 2v1 Godzilla versus the Mutos battle sequence, where this film favors the more realistic kaiju action rather than what Toho is known for with its battle sequences. This ending battle sequence feels well balanced as we watch humans attempt to disarm the stolen nuclear warheads after a beautiful Halo jump scene, which is a 5-star scene in this film. I'm also a big fan of the interesting perspective and views that we get of this battle as it rages on, unlike anything we've ever seen before in a Godzilla film. Everything here is just intense with pure ambience, with one of my favorite moments with Godzilla confronting the Muto, once again releasing a roar of dominance as the clash begins, despite the odds being against Godzilla. I'll never forget my first viewing in this film at this point. I was actively worried about Godzilla and his safety, thinking, is he going to survive this? Things look bleak. The build for Godzilla's atomic breath? Epic as hell. You spend a good amount of this movie waiting, and waiting for it to happen, hoping that we wouldn't get shortchanged, and once it happens, you were just jumping for joy. I remember it being a spectacle as the crowd cheered once the scene hit. Despite some of the flaws this movie has that I've mentioned, I will say that the result of what we got I'm proud of, because it got the most important aspect correct, Godzilla's portrayal. Sure, he wasn't a villain, and humans weren't fending him off with the military, but it was a great new anti-hero approach, and it was passable and made me proud. Plus, this was the perfect way to introduce Godzilla to new fans. If the kids love this, then surely they'll have so much fun exploring the past Godzilla movies. That's what I want. I want the kids and the new fans in general to have that moment where they fall in love with a movie, and then are sent down the rabbit hole exploring everything Godzilla related. If this movie did something special for somebody, then hey, that's awesome. Gareth Edwards made me proud with this one. I wanted him to stick around and make more films in Monsterverse. However though, this was a one and done project for him. He was intended to come back for the second film, however, Rogue One would become Edwards' next film. It's not the best film in the Monsterverse in my opinion, but it passes as a great version of an American Godzilla film. Itself is very different from the following Monsterverse films. The movie opened up well the first week, but took a big drop to X-Men Days of Future Past. But really, I think this was anticipated, given how large the X-Men series had been, and the superhero genre was only rising. 5 years later, the sequel Godzilla King of the Monsters would release, and even then, it was announced that Skull Island would be releasing in 2017, building the fans for the eventual rematch of Godzilla and King Kong. We'll get to that eventually, but next, we gotta take a look at Shin Godzilla, Toho's first Godzilla movie in 12 years, a one-of-a-kind film that has become an instant classic in its own right. This has been Gwen Destruction's Godzilla 2014 as I see it. Like, subscribe, join me next time.